All right, so let's start to get ourselves so that we're centering upon the props, prop asana. And so really the beginning, I want you to settle in your seat right in front of the bolsters. So you want to feel where you're on the floor space. And since this is spatially getting you oriented kind of in your home practice, get a feel where your waist is moving back to the bolster. And before you decide to actually recline back, I want you to make sure that you have a block nearby, and you have a block that you're going to use in this pose, and then a block that's kind of an accessory near your side, okay? So when you have that block support and you lower back, you want to be sure your blankets are close enough for your mind to center onto them. And since the focus here is the ribs to lift and the lungs to follow, I push into my feet and I slide a block. Or if you have one of those massage balls, you could use that. It's just a little bit more kind of springy for the sacrum. And some people like that. So you could kind of sample those two options. If you have one of the round balls instead, you could use that and get a feel for it. The block is pretty secure, right? So that your stability in your hips is defined. And then when you start to lower back, or if you're already on your blankets with your brain, place some weight across your upper ribs spatially, and clearly the ribs go all the way up towards collarbone. So I want you to let that intersection of the ribs be where you might feel the most connection to breathing, right? So most of us probably sense when we take a deep breath that it's felt where the ribs intersect below the sternum. So if I place this to give myself some room to breathe, I can keep my feet a little wider than hips distance apart, knees rest together, or I can extend my legs down, reach into my heels, and then stretch the arms open. So you have two variations of the legs, knees tapping together or legs extending. Okay, so first begin with the simplicity of resting your eyes, right? If you have specs on, you might take them off, but if you feel comfortable to see around that you want to keep that on, that's fine. But in the beginning, I want us to explore getting some room to breathe, feeling how the ribs are supported and balanced right now with this kind of cape over them that's pressing down like a weighted cape. So the waist can kind of waist hail, right? You're working on the motion of the waist on in and exhalation today. And feel when the arms are stretching open where the ribs and the core elongate. So let's take some time here with your eyes centered, with your sand on, to let the core bones center back and the heart open. And feeling where the spine is arching. Feel where there's minimum rotation in any parts of the body. It's all in the experience right now of centering on your breath, settling into the arch and the flow of the spine, whether the legs are bending or descending, and you have some weight across the ribs. Yeah, at this time, right, you may find that the breath practice in the beginning and throughout can be the most centering and useful experience to have a practice. So I really encourage you to let the nervous system have a mild bit of reset. So we're going to take a breath focus, a breath actually count of 4 counts in through the nostrils, and allow the feeling of the ribs to expand, and relaxing the mouth, the face. Let the breath be held internally for about 2 counts, very simple. And then as you exhale out for 5 to 6 counts. If you feel at the end of 4 or 5 that you're kind of puttering out of an actual respiratory release, see what it feels like to be slower on the intake. This is really an Andrew Weil breath practice. So the experience is eventually moving so that your inhale is still about 4 to 5 counts. That's your maximum. Through the nose, mouth relaxed. And as you experience that out breath, let the breath push out of the mouth. If you can experience a few more of these doses of clarity for mind, for lungs. And if it gets exciting for you to simply take a pretty stiff, deep breath, see if you can guide yourself to find some kindness in that entry of inhale. And also slowing that down, maybe not such a winded expression of breathing. Because you don't have to talk, right? There's no talking required. And if you have access to a belt, let's add a belt here. Let's keep that breath experience. Now, the nice thing about being in a class format, there's a couple things in this way, is right? You could take breaks when you want, you could observe, you could stay in a shape for a while. You could mute me too. So if you experience just a pushing on of sequences that's too fast, then simply slow down, go back to the one before. But when you feel the hands holding the belt overhead, I want you to let the knees bend for certain on this one, so that you can actually feel the back body press a little bit into the bolster. Now you can work with feeling your feet a little wider than hips distance. Feel a little bit of a pelvic tilt, but it's tiny, it's minute. It's more of that sense of the back energy of the pelvis in a stability position where you're feeling a pressing back, a pushing into your feet. And then move your belt as wide as you want to hold the belt. That's generous for your chest and the experience of your back strength. Move the belt so it's straight over the chest towards the ceiling. And this time we work on the inhale, filling the lungs. And the exhale as the belt goes back overhead. Try to let your head kind of nestle into the blankets. Inhale, belt towards the ceiling. Try to keep the motion very simple in your shoulders. Exhale, motioning back. Inhale, filling. So you feel as if your sandbag is pushing up. Diaphragm stretch. Exhale, feeling almost a simple centering of the sand. Now, last time, using the breathing exercise to strengthen your lungs. It might seem really simple. And it also might feel calming. If you notice how you feel. And then if you have that belt in the hands, you're going to let it go. And then as we simply start to shift our sand, what we're going to do is give the put the sand over towards the side. Feel when the knees are bending, and then with some care for your core, you're going to lean over to either side and move the block out, over, and try to let this be an ability for you to revolve a little bit through your core, since you have sort of an uncertainty in general right now. We're living with a bit of that. So there's uncertainty right here. What do I do with my rear? So I want you to try to let your body actually use this as a way to roll in towards your right side. And slide your arm, although it's probably already ready to be there. So the right arm is between the bolster and the blankets. and place a block so it's over the blankets on the other side. And then we'll take a sandbag if you have weight, so it's on that left side. Okay. If you're sand free and or if you're needing something under the inner side of that left leg, you could place your other block. If you have one of the larger grippy balls, you can also place that on the inner left leg. But a block does fine. Anything that might help the experience of the waist and the hip ratio to lengthen. So I don't want to hold my neck up here, even though I'm trying to encourage you to have these supports if you like. If it doesn't feel helpful with the block, if it feels more of a nuisance, you might like the knees to be together. You might decide, oh, I want to stretch out my hip flexor a bit, but you get there and you realize the knee gets a little cranky when it's pushed downwards. So that's why you might want to have a block or a ball on the inside. So when I have the sand, if I use this, most likely you're going to find the easiest way to place your own sand is probably horizontal and moving it down towards the hip. And that might feel quite a pin and stretch pulley right through this kind of the tunnels of the side. And so I like these kind of funnel tunnels, okay? Last class we did like this, we talked about the waist tail, right? Inhale, but it's waist tail. So if you have your neck support on your blanket, if it feels a little awkward for your neck, you might place it to be a little higher. If you feel a little tightness in the back of the left side of the neck, this can be a little bit of a pull. And you might also let your body turn a little towards the ceiling and feel if the block overhead is useful. See if that seems helpful. If not, left arm could be over, could be behind you. Head turns, could be on side. But let's place a few moments with breath focus in the intercostals. So I'm trying to keep the sequence so simple. We go from breath focus in the front, upper lobes of the lungs. We dial it around and towards the side beams to get a little more air into our bodies, a little more oxygen. And if you decide you want to turn even, maybe you're a little tired of this pose after a few seconds, you can always turn into sleeping sage anytime. You're going to have kind of a minimized sequencing. So if you decide you want to bring your body towards rotation like here, you could turn and be in this position as well. Okay? So give yourself a feel here as you have that reach of the side bones and the being on your side of your bones and your right side for weight bearing. Selecting that breath pace with the 4 in breath. Give yourself a hold of 2. And then let the out breath empty the lungs. It's almost as if the waist is the only place, right, that you can feel the fullness of the inhale, but the exhale is sometimes a little bit uncertain. Where is that moving out of my body? So let the exhalation help you feel length in your side. Might be a little bit shorter than the last breath pace. We're going to start to slide out from this position. So we'll take it as we keep spiraling through full awareness into our side. And then I want you to slide so that you bring your body to table pose. So if you have sand, push that off to the side. And we're going to turn full cycle through the spine. So we've gone from ribs to side and now to the back line. So feel where your hands are between the props here. Try to center it out. Even if you want to move your blanket up, if you want to move the bolster aside, you could. Let's say you want to add that when we're done with the cat-cow and back series, so you can move it aside. Stretch open the hands. Feel where the tops of the feet are, pressing down, and then as you push down into your hands and into your feet, toes under or toes stretching back, hollow through the belly, and feel where you start to create that lift between the center of the back, and feel where your back muscles are pressing down into your arms, like you're trying to push something away. And then inhale, arching the back, chest forward. Exhale, hollow the belly. Door number 1 is cat-cow, so alternating arching and rounding. So the breath is entirely different on this phase. It's 1 breath per movement. Inhale and exhale. You can keep it with this position with the hands centered, and you can start adding in as you exhale, moving your hips back, feeling your knees maybe separate, maybe your hands separate a bit, and then move yourself forward in towards up dog or seal. So if I'm in seal pose, what I'm doing is moving my hands so they turn out and allowing my hips to lean down into that world of reaching up through the chest. If this feels pretty harsh for your spine tension, you might work on the child's variation here with the knees far enough apart so that the knees don't get as crunched into. And you might work with rounding and gradually leaning forward. Maybe not quite all the way front, maybe crown of the head towards the front space. And just feeling that manipulation in your back body, in the lines of energy in your back. Okay, so option here is to go into a child's pose. You might want to use your bolster, okay? Taking the bolster so it's center, feeling where your hands are resting and your ribs are back, head turns. If you prefer to come into a down dog pose first, toes under, lift up the knees, and try to feel where your reach is through your arms, through the muscles in the arms, because they equip you. You need the equipment of muscles for that sensation of length in the back body, but mostly feel how your legs might orient here. Maybe you'll alternate bending your knees. Maybe you decide to bend the knees a little bit forward and feel a gentle arch in the back, and then press back and wake up the calves. This is a good prep for a nice outdoor walk today, this sequence. Get a nice reach through your arms. Now lower down 2 knees. That's what you got, 2 knees. And then feel your hands wide and forward. If you're in child's pose, start to come up and lean forward so you're on the bolster and or the cushion and you're lengthening front. Try to lower down so that the ribs lower. The hands are still actively wide, but you're not pushing into them right now. Feel where your hands are wide and your elbows are by your sides for a cobra pose. So strengthening lower back, posterior, low lungs. I get a feel of a little bit more of that lower branch of your upper back's connection. And now as you shift your brain center, spine long, try to feel where your neck kind of cruises into length just by adjusting your face here. So feel where you really are defining your back. And then as your hands slide back, we're going to press down. Try to push back with your hips to come up to table. That's a good exercise to work with. Try it again. So when you lower forward, feel when you reach out with your hands right under your shoulder line. When you press, see if you can also mobilize your pelvis to move back to get up. It's a little easier on the wrists. Okay. All right, let's try side sage on the left hip. So you're going to turn to your left hip. We're going to just find where our right leg moves back, where our waist reaches. And if you have a support on the inside of that right knee, which might be a ball, it might be a block, if you like that to support you. You could also have your knees together, okay? And then as we adjust our props, we take a sandbag, and you might find that getting that sand on is easy for the hip, maybe a little bit more contested to get it higher up. But if you really like that side sage with the sand on the ribs, you can kind of work with it. Kind of play with how to get this sandbag on you. Now it's time to figure that out. I'm not there to put sand on you for a while. I'm not sure how long here. So when I lean into it, see if I find that the rib sand is too much uncertainty, you might work with that uncertainty and just see what happens. Maybe you can adjust it. Yeah. Some way to get weight on your side so that you actually can center and use that as letting gravity have you. Using the props under you and wave the right arm so it's over if it's on a block. If it's not a destination pose for you and you like to open the rib spatially or reach back, feel, and then let that pelvis, where you were just working with cat-cow, let that pelvis space feel where it's in a natural arch. So now that your back is not prone, face down, you can define the arch so that the ribs can really reach and span out or span open. Waist hail, so deep breath, costal breathing. So it might feel like a 2-count inhale for some of us. It's a good time of day to figure out how your breath is right now. How are your lungs? Let your heart rate relax. The right arm doesn't have a place to stop and it feels better midair. Notice the muscles, how the fibers pulse to keep the stretch. Give it a few moments here. Just feel. And give the body some time to physically assess where you can use the pose to release tension, to induce circulation in the body. And once that mental study comes into focus, it can help the mind kind of drift away from the news of the day. So if parts of the practice feel useful and you're not sure about timing on your own, you might play with this one for a good 3 minutes, 12 to 15 breaths being a minute. You can place a timer by you for these things too. And now feel the connection of waist circulation in the core bones. Right? They're not necessarily what we correlate with in our bone structure. We tend to musculoskeletally feel about our bones like our knee or leg bones or arm bones, but rarely maybe the center force of the body. So I want to give us a few moments to actually experience the center kind of forces with gravity. So as your sand might slide off, and you want to feel the body rotate and go into a curling position to help you come up. So let's come up to sitting. And let's take a seat. So you're real simple. You're going to sit on top of your cushion, okay? And take a few moments to orient your blocks to you. You're going to want 2 blocks. You certainly can go free of any sand if you want on this one, but let's take it so we have right leg crossed in front of left, okay? If you've got some props to your side, you might have to move some things around a little bit here. Okay, right leg in front of the left. And then if you have sand, you can put it on your right upper thigh. Might be kind of useful for this one for grounding. So as I mentioned, we're working kind of with how we work with gravity when we're upright and with our spine and our strength. So when you're here, take a belt and reach the belt so your hands reach behind you, and you're going to hold onto your belt and feel when you're holding your belt, when it's behind you, that you're moving your shoulders back. And you might play a bit with this would be a good one to take any class notes about postural kind of assessing. So you might feel quite a bit of kind of bold feeling in the arm streams, right? The streams of energy in our arms. So you can keep your sandbag on, or if you don't have a sandbag, no worry. But move the shoulders back and let the ribs feel a little bit of an assertiveness. So I might move my hands closer together on the belt, and I'm trying to get the arm to rotate. So it's really important that the palms face forward. Whether I have my belt wide or it's closer in, it's kind of easier to have it closer in to your center, rather than spread too far out with the hands. So feel the shoulders, and I want you to try to roll them. Try to move your shoulders up, back, and tinker with moving them down. And start to get rolling. Try to get it to roll. And if it's a little brick-like in your back, it just feels like it's kind of clunky, you might move your hands a little farther out. But try to really work with that shoulder roll back. Okay, spreading through the ribs. Different when you're sitting, when you're trying to get the ribs in this position versus lying on your side or on your back. Requires a bit of discipline. You know, with that right leg forward, cross-legged, we're going to let go of the belt. And I want you to take a hold of a block, or if you're going to challenge yourself, you could use one of the balls and roll out. And you're going to slide it over towards your left side, okay? Opposite of the leg bending, right? So we're reaching the right arm over the side, and feel where that hand reaches. You can make this dynamic and expressive. It's your practice, right? So if you get a feel of letting that arm move behind your back, open. Maybe it's been a bit of time since you had a practice right now. So get a feeling if your head turns down over towards the left. So simple. So we're trying to find ways to find room to breathe in the body. So some breathing stretches is what I like to think of. If I'm doing a sitting practice, try to get some breathing stretch potential here. Keep it so simple. Now you can stay with the side reach, arm reach, or back. And then when you're ready, we're going to move the ball or the block in. And we're going to let the body structure lean forward for the hip stretch today, the seated hip stretch. So we'll place the blocks forward. You might tip them up. I like them pretty high up to start. So I can kind of feel my, my legs in a little more of a boxed alignment. You might let the right foot go a little farther forward. If it hurts your knees, right, you can work with moving the legs so they have a little separation. It might work better for some people. So when I walk the blocks forward, I can go forward or a little bit over towards the left, right? Just like we just did when we leaned over with stretch, but now we're actually adding a little more hip to it. What kind of hip? Simple, simple stuff. Simple, but it feels complicated. Okay, so find the experience of breathing, receiving your breath. And if it's all about kind of emptying the lungs on the seated position, it's often a kind of pitched forward tendency, like you drop. So try to work with that core body, especially if you can move your blocks in front of you. So it's a little bit of that arch of the back and feeling your hands press a bit onto the blocks and the spine motion. A little bit of arch. A little bit of hollowing. Okay, now let's take it, so when we change sides, I want us to take a simple butterfly pose. So from that right leg forward, we'll place the feet now together in butterfly, feet together, knees out, and place a sandbag across them. If you have no sand, don't worry about anything across the feet. You can always put your hands on your feet. You can always work with moving your knees so they have more external rotation. And you might decide to place some blocks under the legs. Okay, so reach your arms out, lift the hands up, interlace your fingers and press. And keep it simple here. See if you can sense where the hands are working, where the core maybe helps the brain lift up here, right? If I am seated like this versus seated like this, it's quite a bit of a mount for my neck and a support. So noticing, because that's all we're doing, is we're spending time noticing what is essentially useful for our inner environment, right? To feel a little bit more spacious inside. And now when we lower the brain center and your hands move back out, see if you can lean forward and try to lean out of a lengthening back body. So that might mean you're here and it feels a little bit pressure to go farther forward. Maybe it's leg pressure. You can push your feet farther forward, move your blocks in, and then try to lean front to bring some sensation to the adductors, because they can get pretty stagnant, right? The lymph flow in this space can be pretty choppy, right? It's certainly a energy channel in the body. So you can massage into your calves. You can do a little bit of tapotement, making some fists, and then try to get that to move some of the rubble out of your calves. And the inner thigh, the groins. It's hard to do this, this tapotement when you're in a legs up, right? And when you're in Viparita Karani, but it would be useful to do this before we drain them out in just a little bit. Okay, so let's change the crossing of the legs. So you're going to have left foot forward of right, placing your sand on top. I think what we'll do on this side is go right over into a reaching position. So taking your block out to the right side, you're going to slide that over the block. I don't know if the ball would be very good. It might really lose my balance there. But when you have something, you can have the block flat, you can have no block. Notice the ribs kind of tend to kind of crush into each other. So I want to create a little space here in my side body. So when that that left arm stretches over, yeah. See what you can motion with your side. Maybe it's turning, maybe it's reaching. Right, you've got a whole cycle of movement with your arm span open and more of a closed chain movement. Open chain, And then as you feel when the arm is over, spend a few moments on the energy of this left side of your waist stretching. Maybe it's to feel where the sand really brings balance to it. If I put my sand farther out on the leg, it's pretty intense. Although it might feel safest for you to have it right connected to the, right into the very top of the thigh, right? So it all intersects on thigh, pelvis, hip rims. Okay, arm could be back. Give yourself some moments to feel the side. Feel where the waist reaches. Feel where the waist turns, if that feels good for you. Side body, few moments. And if arm reaching is helpful, feel the reach of the arm. Now, how about this time when we come out, we come up to move out of the side, and then we reach forward with our blocks. And if at any of these you find you need some cushion under your knees, you can use your blankets. You can go without the sand if it feels like it's too influential on increasing the stretch. Sometimes you don't want that much of an intensity. So blocks are forward, or blocks are over to the top right corner. So get a feel of that reach into the side. It's still a little bit of a side stretch, but mostly moving into your left hip. You be the decider. If it's side stretch a little bit, or if it's forward, simplicity. Keeping this practice really simple today. We need simple. So feel where it's simply supporting your core. If you're kind of slumping over a little bit, it's challenging to feel the core strength. You might work with a little bit of moving your back, creating some fluidity in the structure, right? Connective tissue. So feeling that you're juicing the body a little bit, moving. Doesn't have to be much, but threading the breath with motion. And then finally, when you feel kind of as complete as you can, there might still be some areas that just feel like they're still a little restricted. We're going to go right into getting there by moving onto our back. So I want you to move your blocks so they're by the sides of your bolster. You're going to place your sand off to the side, and if you're seated upright before you lower back, you might shake out the legs, might do a little tapping, okay? But you might do some other different types of support when you're at your home practice, right? In the classroom, you might not be as tap oriented, okay? But try to get a little bit of self-massage, because unlikely are you getting that these days. Okay, so when we're going to take the props, plop the props, I'm going to go just simple. One blanket, one bolster, indivisible. Okay, so when I sit on top, okay, I'm hoping everybody can see me easily. I'm going to go look and see. You can see me here. Okay. So what you're going to do is sit so that your back body flows between the bolster and the blanket. And we're going to come right up into Viparita Karani. So get right into our cycle for the immune system, strengthening. So if you have sand, I would put it in your lap so you get right into the business of inverting. And I tend to kind of push down into the edge of the bolster, and then I like to roll back. Okay, I don't do a full roll, but lean back so the sacrum, it all feels like there's a little bit of an arch. If you were to look at this pose, you'll notice, well, that is one arched back. The lumbars are so good at arching. So we're going to keep the arch in the back. And then when we place the sand onto our feet, if you have no sand, no fear, okay? You don't have to have sand, but if you don't, you might use your belt and place that across the feet and push up into it. Because you have to feel some energy of the muscles to keep this pose sustained in the middle of the room. You have to recruit the legs and flush the lymph, right? So it intensifies the flush of the lymph nodes in the groins. So you need to have something that you're pushing into. If you're at the wall, you don't, right? Because you're letting the gravity flush it out when your leg's against the wall. So let's try this one. If you've got your sand, flex the feet. Feel a tiny bit of separation at the knees. So each leg can work on each side of the body towards the lungs, towards the thyroid. Arms are open. Door one is here. Simply stay. Come back to that breath pace of the 4, the 2, and the 5 to 6 exhale. Okay, if you do not have sand and you're using a belt or anything that you have that looks like one of these, okay, you don't have to have it buckled up, you could, but you're going to place the belt under your feet, and you want to have a little separation here with the feet so that you can actually push up. All right, so I'm pushing up, and I have space at the knee level, and I actually feel it a little bit into my hips. This can be useful for you as well. Pulling. Okay, if you have the sand, you want to stay with that. And if you've got the belt, stay with that orientation. And we'll work through a condition for calming the nervous system. So feeling where the arms are, you stay with the same position for a good 3 more minutes. Okay, so we're going to time this one. So we're here about 5 minutes today in this pose. So feel where the legs are certainly holding up the weight of the world here. Let the arms feel that experience of opening the heart. And filter the air in through the nose, belly full. And then as you feel the belly bulge, as you exhale, feel the belly lower slowly. So the movement of the diaphragm is inverting the diaphragm. So you're strengthening the core muscles and the breathing muscles. Right, and it places a little bit of pressure on the baroreceptors in the neck, so it lowers the blood pressure. So in this pose, it would be good to be in it for some time. Resting the eyes. If you have a eye pillow, this is a great pose for something over the eyes. So that places a little pressure around the bones, around the eyes that tend to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you have a blanket, you could always put a little bit of that, like just a corner of that, over you. You could play with that. It doesn't have to be much of one, just anything over the eyes. And eye pillows are nice too. Maybe a sock if you have a sock. All kinds of props at home. So experience the flow of belly and the exhale, releasing. And how long you do the practice for a pose like this, which could be your only home practice, could be legs up or legs up the wall, would be doing the pose until you feel a subtle inner shift in the body. Not just the bones, but really the mind. So feel a few more moments here. Start to feel if you can do a couple leg presses, so the knees bending, so the knees would move so that they reach towards the ribs. And then as you push up, I want you to try to feel pushing energy of the legs. Right? When you're standing on your feet, it's a different essential pressure in our spines, right? We tend to round our backs when we're standing on our feet, bending our knees. So when we're on our backs, our back is flat and straight in this position. It's even with the position of the bolster, it's lengthening my back. So this is a nice way to strengthen the legs. So a few leg presses without putting any negativity in your spine. We're trying to push. Now I tend to find just kind of my lollygag way of doing this, but if you're really defining that, you might feel the knees bending and feel a selection of the vertebrae really stretching, and then feel the pressure. Last time, now as we bend through the knees, we're going to mobilize our leg parts into our hips. So you're going to move your sand either overhead or drop it overhead or move your belt. And you're going to keep your belt if you have your belt, lucky you. So take a belt and place it under your right foot and take the left hand to hold the belt together and cross your right leg over to the left. Give the legs a little bit of energy of motion. You get a feel of reaching through the hip. Quite different than when we were sitting to try to get in our hip. That was kind of a stuck hip cycle. This is giving a full cycle of motion through our leg. Arm is spanned open. Head turns right. Yeah, feel the position of the hand holding the belt and how that pulls the leg. Try to stay on the bolster so you don't fall off of your cushion. So that gives a little bit of an inversion as long as the abdominal organs are above the heart, right? So you want to invert the body so the organs can get a little bit flushed here. At least it juices, squeezes, puts a little bit of position in the organs of circulation. Now as you bend through your right leg, simple, simple. Left knee up, right hand holds the belt, hold on to the left knee bending so it's oriented externally, both legs are external. Rotating pattern, they're moving outwards. And you want to hold on to that left knee so that that position helps balance out the pull around the right knee. So if my left leg was down, it would tend to kind of yank around the ligaments. So I want to hold on and kind of create a little barrier of support. And also it feels like I get a left inner thigh stretch too. I get a little more of both support for both legs. Take a few more breaths, so about another 3 to 4 breaths. Yeah, if the tissues are tough, it's tough stuff to even be in this position, it's shaky. Feel if you can move the right leg a little bit up. Hold onto that left leg, that's the place that might get the shakiest there. Try to feel a full motion pattern of right leg up, hands both hold the belt, separate the belt, left foot up into your belt, and then switch. So the right leg goes straight down on the floor. Hands bring the belt together, hold the belt with the right hand. And when you cross over, you might place your left hand so you're really at the centerpiece, the body, really the xiphoid process, so you're right where the ribs intersect, just in that space, and try to feel that space so it faces towards the sky, right? So it's basically straight up in a supine position, and feel where the left leg crosses over. It might feel different in some sectors of the leg sectors, leg sections. So you could bend the left knee, you could push out and lengthen the left leg. You be the decider on pulse of the hip. Breathing slow. Open arm, head turns left. Yeah, try to find shapes that allow your body to feel how to stretch your breath inside. Really to use this as a practice that's fairly nourishing, cleansing, just giving some inner circulation that you feel in the pose. So if your head is turned left, if it's center, bend the left knee, pull with your hand and slide the right foot on the floor, pressing. Take the left hand to reach the belt and then move your right knee out and left leg open. Okay, so you're holding a bent right leg. You're working on enabling the feature here of stretch through the adductor on the left side, the meridian line for liver, kidney, spleen. So this is kind of a full sensation for most people. And if this side is tighter than the other side, you might feel kind of a rebound. So try to pull with your hand just the right amount for you, especially if your knee is sensitive and you know it, noticing where the pull is in the body, whether it feels more pull in the inner thigh or just around the knee. We're trying to feel mostly the inner thigh, not the knee throbbing, right? So you might have to move the leg a little higher, center and up, versus pulling and yanking on it. No yanking. No yanks. Okay, feel where the leg is outwards. Feel if the mind is inwards or outwards. You have just a little more time to keep it centered here. Kind of different at home than in the studio with timing, I notice. So keeping the emphasis, patience, moving the left leg up. And this time, bend the left knee, move the belt off the foot, simple, belt free, okay? And where you have your bolster, I want you to bring your knees in. If you have a block, bring the blocks closer to your side. Knees in and to your chest, and then push the bolster forward. Feel where your back centers. And I would let my fingertips touch the bolster to be a measurement for me. I find that we're all a little different with how our quads are, our front thigh, the tension there. And so when you take a sample feeling of lifting your hips with your bolster under your feet, just simply notice when you lift your hips if you actually feel a stretch here. So I'd rather use a block-free one in the beginning and work on trying to get the hips to lift, so you're trying to stretch the front of the legs. So your hands can help get that to lift up. You can bring your hands to the floor and press down. I usually feel it in my upper body, not my thighs. And this is where you decide, well, is this blanket a wise choice for my neck or not? So feeling if your neck is supported with a blanket, for some works, and for me, I get a little more out of no blanket for my neck and my shoulder lines here. So there's less kind of pressure, not rounding them, pressing back. Now when you lower your spine, lower the spine first. Try to really get every little segment in the back versus clunking down on the pelvis. So when you lower down, you're using your strength in your hips, your lateral rotators, okay? Now let's take a block or a ball, whichever you want to use. If you've got something to place center of the knees, Let's take about 5 bridge flows. So when I have my hands on my thighs, it kind of ignites the position. It gives me direction of moving the legs forwards. I'm trying to push forward with my hands over the reach of my arms to the back of the space. And then as I lower down my spine, I'm trying to keep the emphasis on my spine. And as that occurs, my hips lower and I center my pelvis. So there's an arch in my ribs. So keep this going for a few more times. Inhale at your own pace. And the breath is 1 per movement on this one. Any movement cycle, I find it useful to cue 1 breath per movement when I'm doing a movement pattern, like bridge pose or cat-cow. Standing poses, that can be useful. So when we alternate lifting and lowering, feel the pressure of your feet. Feel the spine elongate. Now the arms are the last to resolve this position, right? The spine is the first place of attention. So you might notice if you tend to push up and get right into the middle of your back, kind of your T4 or 5, you might find you get right behind the heart first. Like you lift and that's your first placement of feeling. Try to feel when you lift up. I can't make you feel anything specifically here, but move towards the essential sense of the front of the thighs really strong, like they're holding the weight of you right now. And when you let the spine release down, really focus on spine. Your arms could be anywhere, focus on spine, hips, and then move the block aside. Okay, windshield wiper the legs, side to side. The bolster could go farther forward for this one. You might feel that's a little bit tight on the low back if the bolster's too close. So you don't want to skimp on that one. You want to feel like, oh, I'm starting to get some twist. Our final spinal right now is going to be some rotations and some hip emphasis. So bring the knees right to center, about hips distance apart would be good. You could bring them into your chest and kind of notice the spacing. And then when your feet are on the bolster, let's cross the right leg over the left leg and have a block or a ball on the right side. And as you lean over to your block, you're going to stretch the lateral rotators of that left thigh, right? So this is a sand-free one. So I kind of tip over, I lean my weight in towards the block. Feel the left arm open. We're going to space this one out so that we get each side specifically. So I want you to try to work with the sense of the legs focus. No matter where your arms are, try to really feel where the leg is kind of pinned. The right leg over left leg, stretching that left side of the leg. Now feeling this way of shifting into the hip. So I find when my leg crosses, it starts to pin the energy in the side of the leg. It kind of works all the way up into the quadratus lumborum. So it kind of works in this deep low back waist space. And this is nice that you're in your home practice because you can move your props anywhere you want in this next pose. It won't affect anybody in the room. So as you move into the left hip is the deepest stretch for the hip today. This is where you're going to move your knees in center, okay? You're going to uncross the right leg, and I want you to bring the left leg so it crosses over, the same hip we're working on. You can cross the left leg over, place sand on the outer left thigh here. Right, I could put my sand right on the outer left thigh here. Or what you could also do is kick your bolster over to the right. Right leg is reasonably lengthening here, and cross the left leg over to the bolster. And then we add our sand onto the outer left leg, right? So this can be nice to acquire the sand for this one. I find it takes me back a little time to rebound from the last pose we did when we pinned and stretched it over. So squirm a bit until you feel, okay, how will my hip receive this? I really want my thigh, my hip, and my core. So you might take your upper back to be flat and your chest can open. This way your twist is right in your thoracic chamber. It's not messing with your neck, right? And let your arms open and head turns left. Feel the shoulders back, feel the arms stretch out. Let's take a full minute here. And use that sand to be a little bit weight bearing into your actual hip. Yep, your hip and your lumbars. This can work, right? So we want to increase that, that resistance, right? Make resistance in the bones. So the sand brings that upon us, whether we have 5 pounds, 10 pounds. 10 is probably reasonable. I don't know if going over is really going to be useful when we're also stretching at the same time. Not just strength, but stretch too. Okay, so feeling a few more moments right here and now, the chest open. Now at any time, you can start to move out. If you feel you want to be here a little longer, a little shorter, this gives everybody a little bit of room to move and breathe on the spine. So when I start to move my shape, this is a great one to add a reclining pigeon, right? You could place the left foot on the right knee and hug the right leg in towards your chest. And that way you're softening both sides of the low back. Rocking is so therapeutic. Any way you look at it, rocking, any kind of swinging motion is therapeutic, but when we're on the back, we can let the weight swing a little bit from right to left side. And then feel when that right foot comes to the bolster or the floor, the left knee open. Okay, now we're going to switch sides. This is kind of the perfect setup. It's nice. It works good. So if I want my bolster under my feet, I can do that. I can also set up with the left leg over the right and let the leg cross over to pin and stretch. But this is not a good one for a sandbag. It would be a little bit dangerous in the low back, kind of dragging it over in the lumbar. So you can be here. If you liked that bolster under your feet last time, do a little bit of sensing of your bolster, right? And then cross over. I think they're both pretty equal for me, but some people might feel a little better with the bolster. Feel where the right arm is open. This is a good 45-second one. You don't want to be in this one for minutes on end. Even if it feels like, oh, it's so tense there, I need to stretch that out. It must be something going on. This would be one where you could do the stretch, and then you could do some sensory massage work with a ball right into the area, whether it's a trigger point ball, grippy ball, tune-up ball. If all you have is a tennis ball, using a tennis ball, then you can massage into the tissues after the stretch and then go back into the stretch. Some ideas, if you've got time at home. So a little bit more, just a few more seconds on this side. You know, feel where the exact kind of location of the sand would go. So when I move my knees over towards the left, I'm going to either cross the right leg over left, knees over, sand on thigh. If you like this one, because you don't have to move your bolster around, you could put a block over on the left side. You could stack 2 blocks and then start to add your sand. You can also take your bolster over to the left and cross over. Oh, I forgot that massage ball here. So if you end up having that second time, well, missed it the first round, but we'll add that and we'll probably meet like this again. So there's opportunities. So sand on that outer exterior leg, and if the sand actually pulls into the low back in a nice way, you might notice if the sand is higher, the sand is lower. The difference is, right, I find for my nervous system, sometimes the sand right on the actual hip bone feels pretty calming. This feels good. Now, if I can balance that and then stretch my right arm open, keep in mind you want your back to be, your upper back to be centered, your right arm to be open as well as you can. If it's difficult to get this arm to open and you find that you are twisting over to the left, put a towel under it, a blanket, so that you can actually open out the inner arm, the lymph, right, and get that to flush out a little bit. A few more moments. You almost made it. Getting there. So just feeling where the kind of the spirit of the breathing is in your system. Once we kind of dial in, we're trying to keep loading. Just focus on breath all the way to the end. So following the breath to its ends, which is both in and out breath. Now as you slide the sand off of that thigh, reclining pigeon. Some people call this thread the needle, right? You move into your back, you position your right foot on top of your left knee. You reach to the left thigh and pull. You can use a belt if getting that grasp is difficult, but let the bones feel. And the connective tissue is the feel, right? It's where you feel the sense of the nerve endings. That's where it's positioned. So try to scan the area of the body that's positioned. Few more breaths. And get the feel where that right knee is open. The left leg is drawing in. Now as you lower down the left foot and lapse into a final pose, or collapse into a final pose, you could say, uncross, and let's get into the final collapse here. So when you move your knees in, you can roll to the side, or you might want to roll up. And then taking some props so you have height. You're going to place anything to get under your bolster. So it might be 2 blocks at the highest height and a bolster on top. It gets pretty high up. For me, it tips over. I'm short, so I'm best with the mid-height, but some of you might have long legs and that works fine, okay? If you prefer to do legs up the wall, the full legs up the wall, you could find a wall space and scoot up to it and and swing the legs up, but we'll demonstrate Stonehenge pose. So we have a blanket under our head for sure. You can have a blanket on top of the bolster so you have as much height. And as you measure this up, simply get onto your back, have the feet float, have the spine down, and add a sandbag to belly or ribs. Depends on how you're doing right now. So if you feel like you need some true center and the ribs had enough of that sand earlier, or the emphasis, move it to the belly, especially if it's a pretty empty one. This is a good one to get the belly ready for assimilating nutrients in a bit. So as your arms rest down, feel the flush of focus into the mind, into the mind's eye, into the breath, and carry the inhale. And really feel the belly move with the breath. Use the sandbag as weight training. Wherever you have it, if you have sand, if you have no sand, return the body to a state of simple balance. Feel the feet resting, feel the legs draining. Let your eyes stay centered and back into the skull. You have an eye pillow over the eyes. And let's finally carry the breath so that the tune of the breath is 4 count in and 5 counts out. 4 counts in and 5 out. Let your heart gradually open. And maybe feeling a sense of circulation and stability inside the body from practice. Self-care sensation. And it sounds like we're starting to center out of our timing here. So I'll give it to a moment to say goodbye. And so if you want to stay in this pose, give it as much time as you like. You may be entering into your day a bit, into the outside world. So as you move the sand off, as you bring your knees in, as you roll over towards the side, coming up to sitting, or you could stay on your back and just say bye-bye in your own sense of breath. Bring your hands up into your heart space. Feel that awareness of bowing internally to the heart, mind, and those that share practice together. Inhale to each of us and exhale out to the world. Namaste.